Hello, good morning. Good morning, good morning. I know it might be a little echoey in this little room I'm in. It's a little bit different space than I'm used to. And hopefully the mic will help limit a little bit of that. And today, as I put in the post, what we're here to talk about is, I'm addressing CEOs, senior leaders of those mid to, small to mid-sized businesses. And when you have that player, that leader, or maybe a really valuable team player or valuable team member who's an MVP and yet he's an ASS. And I shouldn't say he, they are an MVP and they are an ASS. The jerk in the office who is creating all sorts of backroom chatter, maybe even creating a revolving door on with people leaving from their team, with people leaving the organization, with things not getting done. There's a lack of trust. There's a lack of productivity. There's missed opportunities. And it's not like this person isn't producing. It's not that they're underperforming. They're just taking people out in the process. And that's where I come in. I'm a coach and I coach leaders to become the leader everyone wants to work for or work with, either way, work for, work with. And they are, we're going to dive like headfirst into this common workplace problem. And when you're dealing with that MVP who's an ass, who's a jerk, and causing that revolving door, and causing that lack of productivity or causing that backroom chatter, and causing the fear and the anxiety that's tanking productivity, that's what we're going to talk about today. And it's what we're talking about pretty much every week, a little bit, a little spin on it in different ways and different things that we address with it. And we've all encountered that. It's, when I share this with people, they're like, I don't think there's any office that doesn't have someone like that. And yet it's not always us. And that's something that we'll actually talk about in the live broadcast of why our CEOs and senior leaders are not addressing it, or why is what you're doing not working. That's the other thing we'll talk about. The good news is that there is a solution, and we are going to talk a little bit about what that is. And I really love coaching these leaders to really transform them and help them shift into sustainable behaviors. What I see is a lot of people going through training or coaching just on behaviors that just doesn't work. I've seen so much focus on what they're doing and not what they're thinking and how they're feeling, and because that's what drives our actions. And so what sometimes happens is that these individuals have achieved their success through really aggressive competition, through creating kind of this cutthroat environment, especially in sales organizations, where only the strong survive. And for them, strong meant overpowering instead of powerful. Powerful and powerful and overpowering are two very different things. And what we're going to do is we're going to talk about some of the underlying factors that are driving this behavior, and then I'm going to share a couple of tips of things that you can do to help shift these leaders' behavior. So when you do this, when you work at shifting their behavior, you're not just helping retain that team member and create a more productive workplace, you're also creating a healthier environment for all the employees. And when people see that you're addressing these situations, they feel more safe, they feel more comfortable, they know that that kind of behavior isn't tolerated, isn't acceptable. And so let's dive into a couple things. Let's first talk about the underlying factors. And the underlying factors are really kind of in two camps, either internal elements, like internal to that leader, that particular leader who's the jerk, who's the ass, or external environmental factors. So the two that I'm going to talk about today for the internal, and they're actually, two of them are related. There's actually three, but two of them are related. So the first is a lack of self-awareness. And this does happen. Like there are people who don't necessarily know the impact that they're having on their team or on their peers. They may not realize how their actions affect morale, productivity, retention, and in some cases, they might not believe it, they might not agree with it, and in some cases, they're just not aware of it. They don't realize how gruff or how overpowering they are. I'll share a personal story, and I think I've shared this in the past on these lives. Is I went through some leadership training. It was a week-long training, and one of the things that we did a bunch of assessments before we got there. There were psychologists observing, like up in the lofts of whatever, wherever we were. We had all sorts of team activities, and they were observing our behavior. And each of us had all of the people in the training got a one-on-one with the psychologist at the end of the training. And one of the things that they told me is, Dottie, you intimidate people just by walking in the room. This was back probably in 1997, 98, somewhere in there. And I was kind of blown away. They're like, your height, because I used to be 5'10", now I'm a little under 5'9". Your height, your eyes have this intensity to them. You just have a presence that intimidates people when you walk in the room, which I never knew. And so becoming aware of that, I could look at, I could be observant. I could read the room better. I could, not necessarily change who I was, and I could soften things a bit in order to meet people where they're at. And so that, I will tell you that training wasn't enough. I actually asked for a coach when I got back from the training because I knew I would miss a lot of what I had done, and all of, I wouldn't sustain what I had learned. So that's number one, lack of self-awareness, or they don't believe in what they've been told. So another element is ego and insecurity. And this actually happens more than you think. They think they are above others or better than others, or they have this inflated ego that just makes them more important than other people. And so they look at other people as less than, and they treat other people as less than. Or just as often are the insecurities where they might be operating from a level of fear. And that's where some of these dysfunctional behaviors come from. Fear of failure, fear of success. Believe it or not, even though they are successful, they have this fear. They have an imposter syndrome, which really isn't a syndrome. That's a whole other story. But they might have imposter syndrome. They might fear being vulnerable. Like they don't want to share anything that, they want to be just the facts, only the facts. And so if they're that way, they don't want anybody else to be sharing anything aside from the facts. They don't want to know anything besides the facts. And that can create attention. That can create distance. And in order to really have the productivity and really that team environment that's healthy and strong and that creates healthy conflict, you want to have that level of trust. You want to have that level of connection, and that connection requires some level of vulnerability. Fear of conflict is another one. So the insecurities that sometimes come up are fear of conflict, and they don't even realize that the healthy conflict is so necessary in order to actually get to commitment and accountability. If you want people to really commit, you've got to have that healthy debate that makes sure you're getting everybody's input. And some of the leaders, just any type of disagreement. I know several people like this. And so I've worked with leaders like this. I've worked with leaders who are, either very combative, where they create negative and destructive and personally focused conflict, or leaders who avoid every type of conflict, even healthy conflict. So those are the three things really, that are internal elements to the leader themselves that will create this dysfunctional behavior. The external things are things in your environment, in your company, that might be creating a sense of entitlement, a sense of power, a sense of being able to do whatever they want and not have any consequences. So the first is your incentive structure and your culture. So again, these are kind of two in one. If you reward people for their individual success and not anything that's related to the team, that's just that you're going to have people that are bowling over or mowing people down in the process. I'll give you an example. When I worked at Harley Davidson and I worked in I worked in IT as the manager of organizational management, and I was essentially the OD manager as well, and OD standing for organizational development. And we were talking about who was going to get promoted from project manager to senior project manager. And they were initially looking at just, did they complete their projects on time? Did they complete their projects on budget? And so they were looking at who they were going to promote based on that criteria. And we had been talking about how they were going to all the project managers were being required to first incorporate all of the change management methodology into their projects. And this leader, one of the project managers they wanted to promote, number one, was not really using the methodology. And two, most of the people on his team, so if let's say there were four of the six people on his team said, I don't want to work with this guy ever again. Please don't ever put me on a project with him again. And I heard that over and over and over. And I said, so when they were talking about promoting him, okay, wait a minute. We want to use the change management principles, and that's all about people and making sure we're bringing the people along with the change. But that's not just the people who are impacted by the change, not just the customers, but also the project team members. And he was bowling them over. He was mowing them down in the process. And so they revamped that incentive structure. They did not promote him. They changed and they were more overt about the requirements for promotion. And they were more overt about explaining how, yes, we're incorporating change management and bringing people along in the process, and that includes the team. So it's the suppliers, the team members, the customers, all of those. So you have to look at how are you incentivizing your teams, and is that creating a cutthroat or overpowering set of leaders that aren't really creating a team environment and aren't building rapport and aren't using any empathy or compassion, and they are not creating that level of trust and the connection in order to really bring that team along. So those are some things that you could look at. So we'll talk about how you can shift some of these. Another external pressure another external element is external pressures and expectations. So MVPs may face certain external pressures. So the people who are acting as a jerk, maybe they're getting pressures from customers, suppliers, their peers, their leaders to really continue this high driving, high performance, no holds barred, get it done regardless kind of perspective. And the CEOs, your senior leadership, your HR really need to be aware of how these kinds of expectations can impact your team environment, your culture, and the health of the company long term. You have to understand, what are these leaders' behaviors costing you? They could be costing you customers. I talked with a leader who has sales reps in the field in these dealerships. And they have sales. He said there's probably one in every dealership who is pissing off service, pissing off their peers, pissing off leadership, pissing off customers. You could be losing customers. You could be alienating suppliers who are very valuable to your organization if you have this jerk of a leader who isn't, behaving in a way that's really amenable to having healthy, productive, constructive relationships. And you could also have employees the other thing that's costing you is money in replacing employees if they leave the organization or if they leave that leader's team. That costs you a lot of money. It could cost you 50 to 250 times that person's salary who left to replace them. And there's an awful lot of time in finding someone to replace them, training them. It can take a year to 18 months for somebody to truly come up to speed in a position. So let's talk about a few things you can do. First, if you've got a really highly qualified organizational development manager or possibly an organizational development consultant who can coach this leader. And I would say be careful, not all HR people are organizational development people, and they don't necessarily have to be trained in coaching. I did work as the manager of organizational change management, and then I was the manager of organizational development for a different department. And a lot of the work I did, I learned coaching, and I had different tools. I used a self-discovery process with Myers-Briggs. I used all these different tools, and I learned all of that without a formal coaching certification. I have 2 different coaching certifications now, and I was doing that coaching internally in organizational development. Having someone from the outside of that department, so not necessarily even that leader's leader, but someone from the outside who can come in and really help that leader be more aware of their behavior, be aware of the impact of it. So you want to help them see the impact of their behavior, develop that deep self-awareness when it's happening, being able to separate their reactions from what they think is causing them, which, by the way, it isn't. That's part of the magic of what I do and I coach people, is helping them see how nothing outside is causing you to feel or do anything. It's all the thoughts in your head. And I help them really make those connections and help them pause and pull back and be more aware, really develop that awareness of what's going on here, because that's driving how they feel, and how they feel always drives how they act. So really you want that coaching so that they can see the impact of their behavior, they can find the real source of what's causing their behavior, which I just chatted about a bit, and make shifts that are sustainable, that are long lasting. Most of the time, what I see is training or coaching that only focuses on the behavior. What's the behavior that you're doing? What's the behavior you need to do? And just white knuckle it through. That is not sustainable. And so if you don't have that highly qualified person internally, look externally. That's the work I do. I have several other coaches who also do leadership development coaching. I do specialize with these leaders who are your MVPs, who are in ASS, those jerks in the office, and helping to shift that so that you can take that highly valuable person on your team and make them even 10 times more valuable, because they are really growing that team beneath them, in their organization. So having an outside person who can really help them look at what's going on in their brain and really do that self-awareness. The other thing that you can do is to really start to model really effective feedback. And there are a lot of ways that you can do that. One, you've got to start to build the trust and build that ability to be vulnerable, and maybe even share some personal experience with maybe challenges you've had in the past that you've overcome. Get vulnerable with your leader. Get vulnerable and share some personal stories with them of challenges you've had. And be honest and candid and straightforward about the feedback that you're giving them, and really set the expectations that it needs to change. And whether you help them find a coach or you assign them a coach. I had that happen to me once, where I got assigned a coach because I was having some challenges, but he does not play well with others. And all of this over the years, that's part of why I coach these folks, because I've lived through it, and I found out what really works. And so two things, really getting them that coaching and also providing direct, honest feedback to them. And there's actually some training that a friend of mine offers on feedback. It's something that I do as well. So if you'd like some information about training your leaders on giving good quality feedback, please reach out to me. Just send me a direct message and we can chat. If you want to email me, you can email me at Dottie, DOTTY, at inplainsightinc.com. I'll put it in the comments after the live, because when I put it in the comments here on the live, it doesn't seem to come through in the replay. So please, 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 CEOs, senior leaders, take some action. No one wants to work for these people right now. Can help to start shift their behavior, help to start them become aware of the impact that their actions are having, and don't do it in a demeaning and condescending way, because then you're just being just like that. Be honest and straightforward and candid. Maybe next week we'll talk about providing that feedback more directly. Have a great week, and we'll talk to you next week.